Alright, we are live. I believe it's Hogwarts Day, May 2nd, 2024, which is interesting considering the Hogwarts castle was just incinerated by the Russians. Meanwhile, at Universal Studios, they just created a Hogwarts uh, hologram display, which they just advertised. And I'm like, that's interesting. They created a fake hologram version of it, and then the real one is just annihilated. It's like it's been replaced. Like maybe the real great replacement is the replacement of the Meatverse with metaverse replacements. So you can still experience it virtually. It seems like that's what's happening. And that's where it ends when fake ultimately defeats real. And it's already veering in that direction. I mean, there's no indication it's going to reverse. That was World War III by One Eyed Jack and the Murder Hornets. I put that link in the chat. Joined by Angst G, Portal Complex, Let's Go, Elephant Tusks, Diana South, AJ206, Nicotramus. I was just at the thrift shop, and on the random, I saw a couple of books that caught my eye, and one of them I picked up has an individual on the cover with an eye patch and a nuke going off in the background behind him. And his name is Michael Flynn, which made me think of General Flynn because I was just reading this Substack article about how General Flynn believes that there's going to be another summer of love, basically, that these riots on the campuses are going to expand. And, I mean, that's General Flynn. He's on Steve Bannon's show, intimating he may want to be VP. Many believe he's Q, which is erroneous. But anyway, my point of it is the book is called In the Country of the Blind. So I look at the back, and the description of this book is pretty much what we have been talking about recently whenever we're describing the news bent reality and who or what is ultimately behind it. So here's the back of the book called In the Country of the Blind. What if it were all a plot? What if there really were a secret conspiracy running things behind the scenes and they were incompetent? So that's what it throws in here, the incompetence of the people in charge. And we're always mocking the film, like Mystery Science Theater. We're throwing popcorn at the screen. Their actors do not impress us. The dancing nurses were highlighted in that song. Just that they don't have the best. The best are working for Hollywood or for the actual movies. And these government directors aren't always, I think, given access to the same talent pool. But it goes on to say, it is a little known fact that over 100 years ago, an English scientist mathematician invented a mechanical computer that was nearly as powerful as the electronic brains of the 1950s. The history books would have it that it was unworkable and a dead end. But the history books lie. In reality, the machine was a success, and its existence was hidden from view by a society dedicated to the development of a secret science that could guide the human race away from war towards a better destiny. So, what it's suggesting is that this machine introduced this secret science, which could direct humanity into some kind of peaceful future. And goes on to say that those in charge have apparently become corrupt. But in the beginning, it talks about in the literature behind this machine, which this person discovers in a building she purchases, that there's a science here, they call it Cleological, or that's the term, CLIO logical. And Cleo was the Greek muse of history. And so the writer of this manual of this machine coined the term as a parallel to biology or sociology, meaning a science of history. So what this book is suggesting here is what we've been talking about with the idea of a news bent reality where they're leveraging the power of media to tame and domesticate mankind with a mind war, just like the village we've been talking about as an analogy. But anyway, I'm only 60 or 70 pages into it, but it's a interesting find anyway. Not to mention the title, Michael Flynn, just caught my eye. And the cover does have someone with an eye patch, which we've been discussing the possible significance of these one eye kind of symbols they show us, which are very consistent, but the eye patch in particular. Joined by Duas Impera, Elephant Tusk says, I don't think they're as incompetent as you think. The clown show is just a distraction while the dirty, evil work is done behind the scenes. Joined by Lean Dion. Well, I don't think that the dirty, evil work is necessarily what we think. Like, the deep state is a myth. Hillary Clinton doesn't eat babies. Like, that stuff's all fake. What's real, though, is that the right wing is targeted with a phobia, a fear, a set of fears about the left. But the left fears the right in a similar way. But the left is like, oh, they're full of misinformation, racism, and they're not vaccinated, which means they're not saved and they're evil. Because the state religion has updated these concepts of salvation, and by trusting the church and its priesthood, you can be saved. But these people, oh, they don't go to church, they do it themselves. And so the other side, of course, they are full of all kinds of notions about how evil the other side is. And they create this interesting dynamic where it's traditional sin versus these new concepts of sin. And as you'll see, this is being intensified as the days go by. It's being increasingly intensified where I'm finding more and more religiosity among the far right. And these are all agitators. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think any of these individuals are authentic. But I'm not suggesting they're incompetent. By no means am I suggesting they're incompetent. They're improving. We're going into a deeper level of Plato's cave. We're going into Vault 33, Fallout. We're pretty much there, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to binge watch that movie, that show, Fallout, because I don't want to have to wait until we're locked down for Fallout to finally catch up on the predictive programming. I like to stay current. Joined by Pippi Langstroth, thank you for joining. No, but as far as you're right about it though. The clown show is a distraction, and the truthers actually you nailed it when you said the clown show's a distraction while dirty evil work is done behind the scenes. I think you're absolutely right because what they have done is they have created the clown show for truthers to be occupied, and these are the people who are paying attention, but they're being preoccupied with rabbit trails that lead them in circles that nullify them as any kind of potential revolt, which is what would be required, a rejection of the worldview as given. I mean, people don't understand that we have been immersed in this illusion for so long, but truly, mass media is a global, ubiquitous religion. It is absolutely that. And the scientism paradigm, whatever you think about shape is immaterial. I'm just saying it's templated off of an older, archaic model based on, I believe, maintaining a priesthood elite and an ignorant mass of believers who exist with a hive mind. And the hive mind meaning they're all adhering to a very specific and narrow view of things. Joined by Dead Turtle, thank you for joining. Ted Stryker, sucks I'm late. No, we just got started 15 minutes ago. I just opened up phones as well, so if you want to call in. Although we are working on a project now. We've kind of formally announced this whole concept of a quarantine. So we're not here to platform any kind of agenda. We're not into, like, I'm not trying to back Trump, for example. Although I might vote for Biden, and not as a protest vote, but as a statement, because I think that there's this lockstep consensus conformity among truthers that thinks that, oh, we got to vote GOP to win. And some of them may go centrist, but my point of it is if you're still thinking in terms of voting, then you're still compartmentalized and you haven't separated the political process from the entertainment and the video games and the psyop enhanced news because it's all one and the same. Now, my point here is that the right wing has been more or less turned into an appendage, rather, the conspiracy theorists have been turned into an appendage of the right wing. And I see it more and more clearly. I mean, look at Elon Musk now with X and how he describes X as the place where psyops go to die. So you can deconstruct psyops, but only in an approved manner. It's obvious how controlled opposition works, and anyone who's still following this whole controlled opposition clown show is obviously distracted. So you're right about that. Because the work behind the scenes, if you ask me, is the work of deepening our immersion into this worldview to the point where it does dominate our existence. Like this is a work in progress, but the visual literacy is almost complete, and people do fall for quite a lot. And this is pretty much why I've been saying we need a quarantine. It's not to suggest that we have all the right information and we can say that we believe these things to be true, but rather we know what not to believe and why we don't believe it. I call it informed disbelief. It's not enough to say you say something's fake. You have to know why it's fake or have a rationale behind it, because the people who believe it don't have anything to substantiate their belief. And it's always notable to me that those of us who call something out as fake know more about it than the people who think it's real. It just shows you how much of a disparity there is. And I'm saying that's by design. They have engineered a public of believers when it comes to the worldview and when it comes to critical issues, what they call sensitive events these days. I mean, they're plugged into reality at every other moment, but then there are these certain times. And I describe the mass media as a liar, but it's too simplistic to say they lie with every breath. No, good liars only have to lie once in a while. The rest of the time, they're gaining trust. They're gaining influence. They're getting in a place strategically to where when they lie, they get the most leverage and power out of it. And they've lied to us with very big things, the very big lies that we all agree upon. Now, let me go ahead and make sure my phones are on. I have a few messages, I believe, here. I wanted to go through the chat as well. Someone posted breaking news: another Boeing whistleblower dies suddenly after accusing supplier of ignoring safety flaws. That thing's continuing, okay. It went from train derailments to planes falling apart to, wasn't it still supposed to be cargo ships hitting bridges? Like, I think they're already past planes. Why are they still doing this Boeing thing? All right, here we go. I have my channel comments. If you're a subscriber at Infinite Plane Society and you're leaving comments, I'll be addressing those first. Okay, Andrew almost says Kubrick's famous jump cut where the bone turns into a spaceship was that. Another Kubrick clue about the space flight and the jump cut from the rocket going up, and next we're supposedly in space. Interesting. Dwayne Garrett says maybe a frame montage and sell it premium. Incredible art. Okay. Nicotramus quote, I am fostering a culture of non-believers. Very well said. Yes, that is what we're doing. We are fostering a culture of non-believers. And that's why I've been making it a point to say that if you can't know something to be true and you're just asserting it, and it's just something you can claim to believe, you have to admit that that's qualitatively weaker than knowing for sure and having all the information. And in the information age, we shouldn't be settling for less. Vinny Barbarino, appreciate that. Thank you for the super chat. Infinite Muse says, I haven't been able to catch any lives for a while, but I like the new format, going through comments. Nice to see IPS continuing to move onward and upward. It's actually onward and downward. We're doing deep dives. Penguins are the deepest diving birds, and one of our objectives is to hyper-focus on very specific things. We have a number of projects. Right now it's doxing Q, which is getting interesting. Smarty Pants Dumb says, you look exactly how I imagined. Reason for the face reveal. What do they mean? I mean, my face is on a video that's been viewed 2 million times in the last 3 months, that city council thing. Like, this isn't new. And the point of it is, anyway, is we're working on documentaries, and of course, we are merging with the real world. The purpose to the IPS Insider, that's the coming tabloid, and the interviews that will attend it, is that uh, you have more weight. You exist more if you exist above ground and not just in the virtual realm where they can censor you, delete you, etc. And so we are not we're not anonymous here. We're not anons. And I also think it's kind of important to become real now that we're inundated with so many obvious fake people. I mean, I see these accounts where it's like, how does this person have 1 billion followers when all they do is tweet about how much they love JFK Jr.? Like the whole system is rigged. And we need to outcompete the bots who don't really exist. So there's some leverage to existing. Let's see what else here. Matt everywhere. Grateful for your work. Thank you for joining. Appreciate the comments. Again, because I want to make it a point to read the comments from members on the official channel first. And in the mornings, I'll be breaking down what we're going to talk about later in the day. Okay, one more comment here from user FH9. Decrepit collapse happens slowly and then suddenly as a ragged flywheel, overbuilt, patched, and rusty, spinning faster and faster, beginning to rattle and moan as it comes apart. Okay, this is a very long post. I'm guessing ChatGPT or true literary talent here. He says now we have city and state governments suing the federal government for sending unmarked and untrained paramilitary secret police to kidnap citizens. Okay, somebody's going to have to follow this guy with the fire extinguisher. I'm very wary of manifestos that rail against the two-party system where it's like, oh, we can't do anything else, just burn it all down. Like, I'm not with that at all. And I have to make this clear because we're always having to fend off agitators who want to suggest that if you're not ready to run for the hills or literally fight right now, that you're not doing it right. And to me, it's like, no, if you're reaching for ammunition instead of popcorn, then they're in your head. And if you look at the history of skepticism, which is where we're really rooted in, this whole auto-hoaxology concept, auto-hoaxing, skepticism towards media, it's not new. It's just, it's not directed to media as a monolithic worldview shaping entity. It's very selective when it's exercised. But the ones who created this concept suggested that by suspending judgment and not becoming emotionally entangled with distant things that you cannot even verify, you could achieve a state which they called peace of mind, ataraxia, peace of mind, quiescence. And what I'm suggesting is that this is a form of conscientious objection from the Psy-War. I mean, think about when some cultist or someone proselytizing a religion comes to your door and like, hey, do you want to believe these terrible things with me? I'm like, well, you could, and now you're going to be tormented, and you're going to be concerned about the final disposition of your soul, or you can slam the door. Like you can opt out of these optional worldviews. Anyway, let's get back on track. Dan, does IPS look like Matthew Broderick in War Games? No, but I reference it quite a bit. A strange game. The only winning move is not to play. No, I look more like Justin Moan, weirdly. You know, the guy who chopped his FBI dad's head off and then called for a militia, the Moan militia, to go to work, and then he got caught somewhere. The whole thing was so phony and fake, and he had these like self-published books. I mean, I honestly think that the PSYOP entertainment complex creates clones of targeted individuals or targeted content creators. We've seen it actually. We can speak from experience. If we go back to the story with the fake rocket redneck guy imitating Mad Mike, I mean, we've seen this stuff before. It's just it's a form of not trolling, but a form of diluting one's message. Dewis Impera says, would we notice the growing madness around us if not for the internet? Did the internet create the madness, or was it already festering under the surface, waiting for the internet to draw it out? Now that's funny. Good question. You know, was it already there? And then we just sort of connected it. Like the mind viruses were latent, but they needed a vector. They needed some way to transmit. Daniel Moore says both. Fascinating question there. And that's another point too. Would we notice the growing madness if not for the internet? Because you can have things that are actually routine, but with the exclusive focus on it, they can make it seem like it's all of a sudden, a new threat. Like last year, before the train derailments, or around that time, there was a spate of shootings that involved somebody parks in the wrong driveway, somebody rings the wrong doorbell, somebody gets in the wrong car, and in every instance, they get shot and killed. Some girl's basketball goes in the neighbor's yard, and then he shoots the dad. And these stories were just popping off. And CNN said it's like the Wild West out there in America. And I'm like, wait, we went from trains derailing every other day to now people are just shooting each other and it's the Wild West. And then something else happened. Stormy Daniels happened and it moved on. But their hyper focus on anything makes it appear that this is the thing. So is the madness just more well documented? Which is what I think. And I think it's kind of a shame how much they have censored us in this the infancy of this, of our collective consciousness, because we're all super connected in a way we never have been before. So we're interacting with each other for the first time in strange and novel new ways. But when you look at the censorship agenda, what they have done is they have eliminated content, organic culture, and these new fusions of people and ideas interacting. And a lot of what they burned down was a result of people saying the earth was flat, which is preposterous from their perspective. Why censor it? My point being, future anthropologists will likely be disappointed. I mean, wouldn't they want these billions of comments that they brag about having deleted just to pour over? I mean, there's something in there. There's something of value. So, no, I think it's unconscionable how they just delete stuff. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, don't you think the simulation is smart enough to create these characters and situations? Your subconscious mind is a low and more powerful than you could ever fathom. Oh, a lot more. No. I mean, yes. I guess what I'm saying is this. The simulation is just a modern way, a modern term for describing a scripted event like theater. And if you look at the mystery schools or even Masonic rites and all these different cults, all of their initiations are just examples of theater. And there's nothing new about this idea of taking a theatrical production, a simulation, a mass casualty drill, and then playing it in front of cameras and presenting it as real. It's propaganda. So like there's nothing new to the art. You know, this is like um, the idea that the elite have used the power of theater to mystify the masses is not new. I would contend that the mass media is not only the de facto state church, but that it has an exoteric and an esoteric aspect in every way. And so what I'm suggesting is that we don't have to posit the existence of a literal simulation. We just need to recognize the existence of scriptwriters who can be demonstrated to be used in these simulated events that we see on the news that become historical events. I mean, think about the significance of the fact that every single fake event, let's just take some mass shooting, just fill in the blank mass shooting was fake. We can all agree on this. Well, that means that it was planned in advance. It had a script, it had directors, it had actors, it had every aspect planned out in advance. And they knew that this event will be acted out on the world stage, presented as real, and now it's history. So the concept of writing history in advance is not far out there. It's actually standard operating procedure. We can establish this. And so I don't think we need to rule in simulation or higher power or supercomputer. Although this book I'm reading right now, In the Country of the Blind, makes the suggestion that there was some kind of technology which they created a secret science which was used towards manipulating history. Elephant Tusk says, I disagree. Your synchronicities prove this is all a simulation. Well, there's a couple of other explanations. Like, if you really want to look at this objectively and the advent of media and look at where the predictive programming points, I think we should not overlook the significance of Satanism, basically. And what I mean is, with the advent of Satanism and Thelema, you had this fusion of magic and cinema with some very significant key figures, one of them being Kenneth Anger. And one of the points that he continually made is that Hollywood would be the way that the pageantry of the mystery Babylon religion would be presented to the masses. And this is highly significant when you look at his connection to Alfred Kinsey and the whole sexual revolution, because it's all connected. So, from this perspective, it would seem to me that you couldn't separate mass media, this mass mediated illusion, from magic itself and this new age transition. But that would explain, if anything. But to even go there, you have to kind of accept the premise that there is some kind of thing that we would call magic that involves harnessing the focused attention of human beings and in some way using it as some kind of uh, co-creative, I guess, entity, like almost like a matrix battery. But in other words, do you believe, if you were to believe in the idea that we somehow create reality? But the problem with that is that when you look around, belief doesn't create reality. Otherwise, moon landings would be real, dinosaurs would be real. So you can't even make that argument necessarily. However, generally speaking, the concept of magic in the New Age concept is about causing change in accordance with one's will. And so this is the idea here that the individual does have some kind of impact on how events unfold, which we would call synchronicity. And in the case of mass media, if you look at it as a group magical ritual, then that might explain it. In other words, they're not just propagandizing us to get our votes or to maintain world peace. They're propagandizing us in order to be God, in order to have the greatest amount of creative control over the reality that we collectively inhabit. So it could be that. It could be what I call not just a worldview monopoly, but a reality monopoly. Let's see what else. Elephant Tusk says there is no singular reality. Why don't you call in and let us know what you think? 505 349 0420. Daniel Moore says, Tim, your mic is lower than usual tonight. Is anyone else experiencing that? Or is that just in Daniel Morris's reality? Okay, let's see what else we have here. KK In says, Hollywood is the past. Forget Hollywood. The future, my friend, is products. You're a product. I'm a product. The end of the world is a product. Fallout, episode 6. Interesting. Well, it was Jordan Maxwell who was suggesting that Hollywood is a reference to the Hollywood tree, which is sacred to the Druids, who worship the trees. Druids means, I believe, people of the oak, but the whole point of it is, or knower of the oak. But they have this thing with trees, and of course, the Hollywood is where they get their wands. So he said that the Druids control Hollywood. People are like, it's the Jews. And like, no, it's the Druze, the Druids. Lean Dion says Mike is good. So it's just in that guy's reality. Now, how do you skip over? No, I like that concept though. Look, I don't believe in the universe as described. I'm worse than a quote flat earther because I'm not that. I don't even believe it's been established what the Earth is, as far as do I accept the premise that it's a discrete object floating somewhere? Like, not really. And if I take the interpretation from their own system of symbolism, which is based on older, archaic models of the world, I'm leaning towards John Dee's concept that some kind of plane. Interestingly, I'm reading this book. I get these really books on the cheap from the Goodwill, and I just find the strangest ones. And I found this book. It was like Tales from the Flat Earth, and I was like, "What the heck is this?" And it's not what it sounds like. It's not like some Terry Pratchett. It's about this realm with this underworld, and it's sort of surrealistic, nightmarish even, maybe kind of similar to maybe Anne Rice, I suppose. But it has this idea of this plane, and it's infused with, I guess you call it magical realism. But the idea I'm thinking here is simply that it's a plane, like what John Dee would describe it as, with multiple layers depending on um, your your level of awareness. You can tap into these higher levels, and he was supposedly through his iPhone-like device communicating with something. Angst G says volume does seem low. Okay, I wonder what's going on. Not sure. Everyone says low, but that's likely something I can fix here. If it's maybe it's using the wrong mic. Gremlins possibly. Okay, so there we go. That's probably the best I can do. I'll try one more thing. Yeah, gremlins. Anyway, this conversation about simulation theory, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a new set of terms to describe what's not really that new of a concept. And I find it all interesting. Like, there's a lot of concepts that involve this idea of an astral plane. And it's not an astral sphere. It's decidedly, distinctly a plane. And the way John Dee described things is that there's levels of planes, that it's stacked planes, in other words. And so if their experiences are genuine and they were having out of body experiences or having transcendental knowledge, wouldn't they have some kind of visual confirmation of balls in space as described? Ancient says, must not backslide into solipsism nor religion. Well, yeah, and that's why I've made it a point to describe predictive programming as what it is. These are not coincidences, as the media would say. These are not magical synchronicities, as most of Trutherville would contend. The synchronicities, the coincidences that we see that connect the entertainment, both past and concurrent, with the news and quote real life events, yeah, this is not evidence of a divine hand. This shows you that those who are implementing our history in advance are part of the same department, you would say. They're part of the same department. And what they're doing is the same thing that advertisers do. And they're just presenting the scenarios and pre-selling it. Drilling it, boring neuro pathways to the point where it's so redundant that when they implement it badly on the world stage, everybody believes it. But as far as going into any kind of mystical explanation for it, no, we can rule that out. But what we can't rule out are the implications for everything else, considering do we live in, I mean, it gets into the metaphysical, and why shouldn't it? If we are spiritual beings having a physical experience and we are 99% of the time immersed through a false model, then obviously that would have some kind of broader implications. Like it wouldn't be far-fetched to think even that the entire purpose to the immersion in a false model is to create that split, to create a sort of an electric fence between one's meat suit and one's higher self, one's intuition, one's potential for precognition, telepathy, things that shouldn't exist. I mean, they shouldn't exist if we're just evolved apes. I mean, maybe, but if anything, the general explanation these are just erroneous ways of interpreting things, or it's wishful thinking, apophenia, or pareidolia, etc. And how is that? I mean, when people are looking at predictive programming, they just rule it off as coincidence. How, that is a perfect description of how incurious people are, where we've demonstrated that these are not mere coincidences. By correlating it in this way, no, we've established these are indeed patterns. So, what does it say about those who cannot see the patterns, about their level of awareness, situational awareness? It's that digital veil, the hoodwink of our time. It's, the wool pulled over your eyes. All right, let's continue here. Pippi says, sounds good to me. All right, we're just kind of getting started. Ryan Garcia failed a PED test on May Day. Now, is this real or is this scripted? Here he is.
Dress this bull fucking shit claim that I cheated.
Lies.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that I don't cheat.
Well, we don't, because he just admitted that he's the world's greatest troll. Yeah, if you want to call in elephant tusks and describe, I'm not ruling out quote simulation theory. I'm just saying that's a new set of terminology to describe something that's likely not new. We have Ryan Garcia on the screen, Mr. Me Too Bohemian Grove, who admits that he was lying, but you can't fault him for it because he raked in $50 million. But again, here's what he's saying about being accused of using drugs.
What can I say? Why didn't they come out with this before, the fight? If they found it before, why would they let me step into the ring
Right.
as a cheater and then come out with a victory and then they post this? Again, these are people that are trying to attack me for whatever reason, but no weapon against me shall prosper. I never taken steroid. I don't even know where to get steroids at the end of the day. I barely, take supplements. They're saying it's coming from the ashwagandha.
He barely takes supplements. Okay, very believable. Yeah, the music in the background is what sold it to me. He's innocent. Anyway, just WWE, that's all. Okay, let's continue. Donald Trump came out to say, because, previously he was sleeping in court and he said he was praying. He says, contrary to fake news media, I don't fall asleep during crooked DA's witch hunt, especially not today. I simply close my beautiful blue eyes sometimes, listen intensely, and take it all in. So he's reflecting. He's just being pensive. So he's not losing awareness. Okay, let's see what we have here. Going through your comments. All right, phone is open 505-349-0420. If you listen to the noise in the background, it's janitors cleaning up. Is anyone surprised that Georgia GOP District Chair Candace Taylor doesn't believe the moon landings happened? So this is not a win, by the way. When somebody says they don't believe something, like Lauren Witzka and characters like this, these bomb throwers, basically, when they say they don't believe, these are generally low information non-believers, not the same as an informed agnostic about something, someone who has informed non-belief. So here's where she's talking about moon landings, and again, this is a very weak position. It's just stating they don't believe.
I do not think that they when he landed on the moon. I don't believe that. It looked fake. It looks fake to me. It always has since I was a little girl. It's looked fake. Why haven't we been back? It's common sense. I do not think that they when he landed on.
Now, that's fine. Like, I do not believe they landed on the moon, but um, nobody's taken it to the next step. If that's not true, well, it's kind of hard to prove it one way or the other because it's in the past, right? But you don't see any of these individuals saying, well, now let's look at the space station because the space station is their Achilles heel. So I don't think this is like damaging at all. But I do notice that the right wing, as I've been saying, they are target marketing conspiracy theorists. They want your vote. If you believe in conspiracy theories, fake moon landings, chemtrails, they will do whatever it takes and pander to get your vote. All right, let's see here. Thirst for Truth has joined us. Thanks for joining. Now we are also seeing a whole lot of these. And I think these are a lot likely provocateurs, but a ton of these right-wing types getting extremely religious, getting deep into prophecy. And speaking of prophecy, here's Mike Flynn, General Flynn, and he's suggesting that the Biden administration is going to ramp up the riots and declare a national emergency in some way so we can't vote.
We should be prepared for this administration to declare some type of national emergency. I really, I feel that. I know some of the things that they're doing in the White House right now that they're contemplating. I mentioned some earlier. So that's number one. The second thing, if everything moves forward and people, you got to get out to vote. We cannot have 65% turnout for a presidential election in this country.
Anyway, this is General Michael Flynn, who, if you remember, had many of his followers chanting prayers to the archangels of the seven rays, which comes from the Church Universal Triumphant, a cult which in the late 80s went underground literally because they believed that China and Russia were going to nuke us and they were hiding from fallout. So there's an interesting recurring theme here with fallout and China and Russia. And Flynn has actually specifically said that when China activates the EMPs, anyone who's had the pokey will experience a head explosion. So wear a raincoat or don't be near them at the time. Anyway, it's maniac General Flynn going around the country basically pushing Q nonsense and dog whistling. Definitely about the end times. Here's another one. This is Gene Bailey says the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights were written by God. This is not new. Glenn Beck used to say that the country's founding documents are holy scripture.
I want you to understand all that we've talked about with George Washington and our founding fathers and how we got our Constitution. It all goes back to Scripture. Everything that John Locke's two treatises of government, the Magna Carta, there's so much Scripture woven in there. If we will embrace what our founding fathers did, Greg, and with these documents that were not, I say they're not just penned by man, they're written by the divine hand of God. And some of these amendments, the Bill of Rights, those things are divinely inspired.
And Kenneth Copeland has reminded us we have a covenant.
Okay, Kenneth Copeland with his expensive $44 million jets, which he justifies because he's doing the Lord's work. Then you got Bill Gates with his equally expensive jets, and he's like, well, I'm doing Gaia's work. So they can both justify living in ways that their followers could never dream of or would even attempt, because they have these true beliefs. But no, these guys who promulgate the beliefs can break their own rules. But anyway, nothing new here, suggesting these documents were written by the hand of God. And you know what? Whatever happened to those people who are saying that during the eclipse it would be revealed that America is actually Israel and MAGA is somehow the chosen people? Like, they're pretty much there. But that didn't come true. Nicotrama says, I believe the controllers want us to vote so they can survey the masses to confirm what percentage is immersed in the illusion. Yeah, well, now they can just read your DMs. Apparently Netflix purchased all the DMs and your search history if you're a Facebook user. And they really do have deep research into what we think about. They have put so much effort into this. And it really goes back to Edward Bernays and his relative Sigmund Freud. But I think you're right about that. And that's why I'm suggesting that if you're voting, you're participating in the info war. You're no longer a non-combatant. You're essentially taking a side. And I'm not going to vote for that reason. But not voting is not enough, because I don't want to just be lumped in with those who weren't motivated to vote. Like, I want to have an anti-vote, something to refute the very concept. But it doesn't really work in their closed system. So I'm thinking I could make it work if I vote for Joe Biden and publicly endorse him, because I would be the only person who's truth reveal adjacent, conspiracy theorist, in general, conspiracy theorists will always vote for the right. So it would reveal something. Because if anybody's reaction is to do anything other than laugh, then they're taking it too seriously. They're still falling for the spell. But I think it might be the only way to legitimately protest. Okay, continuing. This is a description from Albert Pike in the book Morals and Dogma, which I had an interesting synchronicity with my copy of, not this book, but a related book. But it has to do with, well, we'll get into it at some point here. But let me get this video up. This is a description of the world according to Albert Pike. This is page, no, is he going to read it or is he just going to show it?
Right on page 8.
Okay, no, he's not going to read it. How annoying. He did quote him higher up, but I don't think I have the damn quote. Okay, that's Wits It Gets It, the guy who debated Flat Earth on InfoWars with a, here it is. The square is a right angle formed by two right lines adapted to a plane surface and belongs to geometry and earth measurement that trigonometry, which deals only with planes, and with the earth, which the ancients supposed to be a plane. The compass describes circles and deals with spherical trigonometry, the science of spheres and the heavens. Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma. Now, does that mean the earth is flat? No, he's talking about the ancients supposing the earth to be a plane. And that, it's an interesting statement nonetheless, but it's one of the implied meanings and uses of the square in their symbol. By the way, there's another quote attributed to Albert Pike that's not real. Something about worshiping Lucifer. That's not real. It's not in the book. Elephant Tusk says, doesn't matter anyway, we're all stuck on this roller coaster ride. Yeah, that's an interesting way of describing it. And I think that as long as you're plugged into auto-believing the worldview that they manufacture, you're entangled and you are in a sort of a relationship that goes up and down. Periodic terror, build up to terror, crescendo, and then maybe they distract you. But this clown world show, I think, is meant to entangle you. And I would suggest here that if we're going to continue this discussion of where does magic and media merge, um, if that is true, if any of it's true, then I would recommend perhaps looking at this thing a little more like um, a form of entrainment, like hypnotism, perhaps is not even far off. I mean, think about the pervasiveness of predictive programming. I mean, it shouldn't even be legal if you think about it. We get these whistleblowers, fake whistleblowers. Get the like Project Veritas or O'Keefe Media comes out and he's like, yeah, the CIA is lying to the president. It's like that's not even scratching the surface. That's like within the box conspiracies that don't even get to the edge of the box, which itself is in another box. Dewis and Paris says we've all been given a life sentence, it seems. Well, my suggestion here, though, is that if you were to recognize that the news media is controlled, like at a deeper level than anybody thinks, just the fact that weapons of mass destruction are just simulated, that should be a paradigm shock. It should be a shift. But most people probably won't be able to approach it as such because it's too big of a claim. Because they've accepted the evidence of the screen. And the screen is an argument from authority. Oh, I saw it in the movies. I saw it on TV. And it just becomes a hyperstition. So we live in a closed system which is infused with a number of hyperstitions, augmentations that you really can't disabuse them of. As Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. But my suggestion here is that, again, by recognizing it for what it is, you can conscientiously object. You can actually unplug from the obligatory automatic belief in everything until it's proven false, but instead, by becoming a non-believer. That's why I said we're fostering a culture of non-believers, non-belief, by rejecting belief itself, because that's their main weapon. The main weapon of in this Psy-war is putting people into these belief systems that are all disconnected from objective reality because not one of them, not one of the accepted worldviews, Trutherville, Woketown, Normieland, not one of them includes in their big assessments the fact of how fake many of the aspects to our collectively shared worldview is, whether it be the weapons of mass destruction or even, I don't know, there are certain cosmology questions we could raise here, but the main thing I'm suggesting here is the world of fakery is underestimated. People kind of think that fakery may be a tactic or it's a way to influence public opinion, and it's actually fake is the rule, not the exception. And another point too, it's not a stretch to say they're lying all the time. Even if they're telling the truth, they're lying in the sense that their frame of reference rests upon an edifice of lies. And many of those lies are also lies by omission. And what are they ignoring? Well, they're ignoring the fourth wall. They're ignoring the backstage that's shared by all the supposedly competing countries, nations. Like, I think it's valid to say that there's only government, one government. Why would you make a distinction? There's China and Russia, and maybe China doesn't like us and they're going to EMP us, or Russia is going to do, like, come on. We all share outer fake space. That's the thing that shows that, no, we are in universal agreement. 2020 showed this as well, where if you thought there was a tyrannical takeover by one encroaching world power over these sovereign nations, and they would stand up to it and they'd say, well, that's fake. I'm not going to kowtow to this. That's obvious propaganda. This is debunkable. But no, nobody ever does. Just like the NRA will never call out a fake shooting. The Armalite, who paid out 73 million, will never call out the obvious fakery that anybody paying attention can call out. And that's because, of course, they're participating. Let's see what else we have here. Plain Decoded says all militaries have similar uniforms, hats, and ranks. Yeah, and another point too is that everyone who goes into the military goes through the similar initiation process. But at the end of it, no matter what your occupational specialty, no matter what you're doing, to be in it, to be in that closed system, which is a box within the box, you have to believe in all these fake things. Like, you wouldn't have the ability to opt out. You wouldn't, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be compatible. I mean, it's fascinating how compartmentalized things are. Mr. Trustworthy says Pike's seething energies of Lucifer proclamation is only visible to Masons who've taken the chip, which is only accessible through pores of chemtrail believers. Okay, that's why I never saw that one. Now, Albert Pike is a Confederate general. He did have statues. I think there's a statue of him in D.C. that was pulled down by BLM, interestingly enough. I'm like, of all the statues, you think they would have kept that one up. BLM, Albert Pike, D.C. Here we go. Protesters topple and burn statue of Confederate general. They gave him the demolay treatment. Yep, there's a picture of it too. Why was the Albert Pike statue taken down? Why was it burned? Anyway, he died at the age of 81. And he's the one who wrote the degree. So if you don't know the significance of him, he had written the degrees from 4 to 33. And of course, 33, we all know, order out of chaos, and the double-headed eagle. You're familiar with much of the symbolism that would suggest that if anybody can be blamed, or if not blamed, pointed at as having some kind of inside information about the world stage, and if there's anyone you could say, hey, they might be backstage, a lot of it would probably look in their direction. But it's not monolithic. Freemasonry is not monolithic. It's just an easy scapegoat, or rather straw man at this point. It's a lot more nuanced, in fact. It's kind of an archaic version of the way that they probably really have it structured. I call it the lie world order. I still envision it as a pyramid. And we're at the bottom, of course. We're in the realm of subjective belief. We're the believers. And then above us are the knowers at various levels on a need-to-know basis, but it's certainly stratified like security clearances in a way. Secret societies have a similar thing, security clearances, and that is what the Masons are modeled off of, the trade guilds. Like, the central myth is about this character who is the architect for King Solomon, and he protects the secrets and doesn't share the blueprint. He's accosted by 3 individuals who try to get these secret documents from him, and because he won't reveal the secrets, they kill him. So their martyr cult is built upon secrecy, and then the secrecy that goes into a trade guild, trade secrets. And I'm suggesting that media itself can be looked at in a similar way, that a lot of low-level reporters are clueless about crisis actors, psyops, how much of it's propaganda. They would have no clue because they're in the immersive illusion. They would have to be. You wouldn't be able to integrate if you weren't a true believer. And it's better to look at mass media writ large as a religion. It really is, because there's a whole worldview that goes along with it. And if you're not a believer, it wouldn't work with you. You wouldn't be, it'd be like an atheist trying to become a priest. There'd be a conflict of interest. But my point of it is, there would be levels of awareness about what media is within media itself. We have a more enlightened or initiated interpretation. We have removed our hoodwinks, and we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to know. We're not supposed to know that the ubiquitous window to the world is in fact a filter and always has been. All right, let's continue here. So when we talk about Masons and stuff, it's not irrelevant, but it's not like you can say, hey, these are the ones who staged these events. But it is very clear that there is a pervasive element within the symbolism that points to that, but it's very eclectic. And that's the whole point of Scottish Rite when you look at Albert Pike's work. It's where it combines from many different sources, gods or symbolism, archetypes, teachings. So it's kind of like syncretic and very eclectic. And so that's where I'm at now in my interpretation of this whole space program. I call it NASAtology because it's a space religion. But when you look at all the elements of our modern worldview, which is a religion, it's the ancient worldview dressed up with science, painted up in a new way, but it's all just window dressing. It's no less superstitious, although superstitions are now hyperstitions, which is a better way of describing it, because we live in a construct. I mean, we have our physical world, obviously, but we're augmented by this construct that we agree upon, which they add all kinds of stuff into it. And these things that don't exist are reinforced as being real through this constant feedback loop, which qualifies them as more than just mere superstitions. G33 says esoteric study helps discernment to connect dots on the macro visual. Well, I have this notion though that your your intuition, for example, or even the existence of a um, level of consciousness that transcends the physical body, like this stuff is kind of outside their closed system altogether. But I think that literal belief in mass media might even be detrimental to one's connection to intuition or any kind of higher purpose because it's contradicted. It's gaslit. You know, your own personal experience, your personal experience of reality is contradicted, and you're told, well, what are you going to believe? Your own eyes, your own senses, or what you see on the screen? And most people lean into the screen, and that's likely, in my view, to blunt one's relationship with intuition. And I noticed too that people who, and that's I'm not judging. I mean, people have priorities, but people who aren't connected with intuition or any kind of sense that there is such a thing tend to be very dismissive of it. And if you're surrounded by people who do not acknowledge this, I could see how you could drown out what you would term spiritual or transcendent in the labyrinth of the time space demiurge construct. And that might be the purpose. The purpose may be to, steer this, like, let's suggest, like I suggested before, maybe it's light and dark, this concept of spiritual warfare, but maybe they win, maybe darkness wins by disconnecting incarnating souls from their point of origin, which it would be easy to do with all these distractions. Plain Decoded says if you want to work on your intuition, practice Zener cards. It's amazing how good you can get when your mind is clear. Interesting. All right, let's continue here. A commenter says U.S. will be at war on 3 fronts by November in civil unrest, so there will be no election. Well, Joker 2 comes out on 10/4, like a month before. So I hope they don't lock us down before that. I'm kind of looking forward to it. Commenter says you either have it or you don't. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, I'm confused. You say there are other spiritualities, but only this version of the physical. Well, look, I'm actually an objectivist. I'm specifically an objectivist. I don't make any leaps, and I don't extrapolate anything beyond what is obvious. Like I shy away from gematria calculators. I knew there was a trick in there somewhere, but I don't know. I mean, like I'm not. That's not even the focus of this channel, to be honest. Although it's somewhat related. It is related in a sense because what is the point? What is the well, like people ask the question, well, why would they lie about the shape of the world? Well, a lot of reasons I could list. Hiding land, resources, artificial scarcity, quarantining a huge segment of the population for a lot of reasons, but why would they lie about the worldview? Well, maybe part of it is one, some kind of a way to nullify billions of people. We've been conquered. Uh, but two, maybe there is some kind of extraction, some kind of tax. Like they tax us, they tax the air you breathe. Why wouldn't they put a tax on your soul? Like that's the whole loosh concept. But as far as like I'm not going to misdescribe this place like, oh look, I've had these experiences that suggest that death is fake, everything's fake, and then I'm just going to turn away from the world. No, I don't think so. I mean, this might be a game. There might be an objective. Maybe the objective is um, exist at this level without losing sight, without getting buried in it. Like I don't think this is a punishment. And all the symbolism suggests that the purpose here is to see through the cycles, to recognize that there is a plan or an order. And then, I mean, the Truman Show is such a great analogy for this. And it has deep esoteric meaning when you get into the dog star falling and the names. And there's a couple of meanings to the name. Obviously, he's a false man who becomes a true man when he ceases to believe the lies of everybody around him and he follows his intuition and he exits the simulation, which is being run by Ed Harris up in the moon. But then there's the other side of it, the Truman Show and President Truman and the nuke and the advent of the atom bomb, this new god, put us into this new game. We were all dragged into a movie, a Truman Show, where the directors can simulate everything around us as long as we follow their scripts. But but look, there's other elements too that I think are very interesting because I think that underlying this there is some kind of esoteric knowledge that maybe like look, if there's suppressed technology, it's not aliens, it's not anti-gravity, it's not a secret space program, it's the Force, like in Star Wars. Whatever it is, it's the thing that they conceal and somewhat show in our faces, but it's the knowledge of self beyond the meat suit, which they completely occult. I mean, if you take it literally, the idea of evolution, which is really, it's really, from on many levels, a satisfying explanation. But if we are merely evolved apes, then you can rule out divine origin. So we are from the mud. And that's very materialistic, and it doesn't necessarily include as a necessity a soul. Like the soul is just a concept that we entertain so we don't recognize how meaningless everything is. So it's kind of interesting how the scientific paradigm kind of seems to just rule out meaning itself, and all sense of meaning is just some kind of desperate plea. It's kind of funny. It's actually kind of a joke because my perception of it is that matter is a substrate of mind. That we're not from below arising up from the mud, but rather we're descended beings in some sense. But I think we exist on a continuum. And I haven't figured it all out, but I have some ideas about how it works. And I've been looking at John Dee's work for some concepts here. John Dee, the astrologer, magician, advisor to Mercator, coined the term British Empire, originated the whole idea of Western occultism, ritual magic. It all goes back to him. And I think it's relevant here. Like if we're trying to figure out how the elite really think, we have to know the esoteric, which is why look at the space program and the iconography, the symbolism, and how it does correlate with Jack Parsons, and not just Jack Parsons, some fringe guy with the movie star and the Scientologist, but the Russian rocket pioneers and cosmism. None of this is new, and that was based on science fiction and theosophy. Like this outer space is a replacement for an archaic concept of heaven, but it may also just be an allegory for ascended states of consciousness, not literal moving your meat suit up into space. Now, I don't know if the astronauts are given the initiated interpretations or not. I mean, I could see it working a couple different ways. There's a new movie coming out soon called Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson, which is about faking the moon landing to trick the Russians. But these things do not rule out the existence of space travel. Dan says, is Trump de-aging? You know, I saw a picture with Ryan Garcia posing with Trump. I'm pretty sure that was a wax sculpture of Trump. KK In says, someone else I follow mentions taking souls by taking the prints or souls of feet of babies after they're born. Interesting. Right. It's kind of ominous, and it makes sense in a strange way that you're being delivered, you're arriving in this world, and the instant you're here, you're being logged and you're being put into this database, and then your souls are imprinted. It is kind of ominous. It's like, well, I would maybe suggest that this might be the lowest level. I mean, I don't know. I'm just basing it off of the model that has been posited by some of these new age or these occultists. And it's like, well, why do we even bring this stuff up? Why would it even matter? It's not us. I'm sorry, it's not us. We're simply observing what is presented to the masses and examining it at multiple levels. And you cannot separate media from religion, and you cannot separate the esoteric from any religion. And the esoteric is a side that is only intelligible to the people who have been clued in. And we have been clued in a few ways. Let's see what else we have here. And of course, we have phones open if anyone wants to call in and chime in on any of this stuff. I think it is interesting to kind of speculate on the implications. Like this is a multi-level prison or something that, yeah, you're here physically contained. You don't have a choice. But they override your intellect and your mental faculties through emotional manipulation. But then we have this other element here where we're entrained to something and we seem to be plugged in at a subconscious level. And there's some other element. So in my research, and I really started my research on this matter deeply like last autumn equinox, I went to this event and I picked up a bunch of books just to get an idea of various magical philosophies. And one of the things that I continually come up against or come up to is this idea that there's something that is transmitted, or rather, there is like thoughts or things, focused thoughts in particular, and that when one is focused on something, an image, an idea, a concept, the thing that they're imagining exists in the realm of possibility. And whether it can be manifested or not depends on the ability of one to project their will. And it's a multisensory, visualization is just part of it. But what's more, whether or not one is consciously directing it, one is still, according to this theory, somewhat responsible for what they bring into their worlds. And so, according to this magical theory, when it comes to group magical ritual, it wouldn't matter if people are aware of where their will is being directed. I mean, that's what I mean when I say matrix batteries. And Morpheus, of course, god of dreams, forms, the form, how things form are basically a matter of, again, what we're summoning forth or calling forth. And so if this is true, then just as they take some of your income, they tax your income and then they invest it where they see fit, they're taking your soul, they're taxing your soul, and whatever we're getting, whatever we're collectively experiencing, is more or less being directed by special interests. That's the suggestion here. But as far as what level of control or manipulation, I don't know what the guardrails are. Like that may be part of it. I mean, there may be some element here to where maybe there's a built-in governor or barrier that has to be overcome for deeper levels of control. So, for example, in the work of Peter Carroll, he writes on this topic, he calls it chaos magic, which is simply magical theory separated from any religious paradigm or any dogmas or gods, but rather gets into the fundamentals. That's the whole point of his thing, is just trying to get into the fundamentals of what's behind all this. And in his work, he suggests that we are limited in our ability to participate as co-creators by our own, what he calls psychic censor. That we do have some built-in limiter that prevents total abject chaos. We have to have order over the chaos, but that the process of being or acting as a magician involves breaking the psychic censor, overcoming it through ritual or magical practices, sorceries in various forms, various practices that are all intended to overcome the limitations of the I, the self, that holds everything in place, for Truman to break his programming. So what's interesting is, if there's anything to this, then psyops would present an opportunity to disrupt the psychic censor, to create some chaos, and then out of the chaos, implement some new order. So how much power does that give them? Well, psychologically, everything. But as far as beyond that, the ability to manipulate or control reality in some deeper metaphysical sense, I don't know. That's kind of what we're. Okay, so I'm going to stop using Skype. I'm giving up on Skype because it decides to ring on a whim. Sometimes it rings, sometimes it doesn't ring. And I don't know what's going to trigger a ring and what's not. So I'm going to probably change to a different phone system here soon. So we will resume phones. I'm going to have to cancel my subscription, and I'll go with the one previously that had a queue, where we could have 5 or 6 callers back to back. So again, I apologize if you're not able to call in. Skype is unreliable. Gremlins, we've been hacked. Not quite sure. I kind of resolved that last week. I decided, if it doesn't fix, then we are done. Angst G says, since so much effort is put into perception management trickery, seems like a collective consciousness is an important factor in constructing reality. Right. Well, I'm just taking the theory behind group magical practice and then extrapolating from that. If you were to magnify this into millions of people, synchronizing their focused will and attention on a black box. Black, the color black, the cube, these things are all, I think, very symbolic. And the fact that we have this black screen, the black mirror concept, I think it refers to absorption, like total. It basically is like a magnet in a sense. And when I say they're extracting something from us, focused attention, thoughts are things, well, it ties into the idea that we are in some way, and souls don't exist according to this modern paradigm, but hypothetically, if we are light descended into matter, then light is what we are, sentience, awareness, and that this itself, it's like blood in a sense, but in a more non-corporeal sense, is being extracted. So then my question would be, what would this place be were it not for the vampires? Like, if the world's basically a big vampire, and if it wasn't run by vampires, if there wasn't some kind of mass soul extraction conspiracy, not to mention distracting us and focusing our attention, what would it be? It's an interesting question. And the only way to find out, David Hicks says, what's your goal, IPS? Is this conspiratainment? I'll tell you what, because people will say, what's your goal? Is it just conspiratainment? Well, if your goal, not you, but if people think that, hey, the news media is lying, so I need to become alt media. Well, what you have done is you have just become a participant in your own brainwashing. Like, I'm not into being brainwashed. I don't need a religion. I don't need a religion built on provable lies, and I don't need to blindly conform to a false worldview. So that's enough for me. I'm stepping out of the one world religion. Like, what else? And it's not about conspiratainment. The fact that I'm entertained is because this is a very intriguing, interesting problem that we've encountered. And it's not something we were meant to encounter, if you ask me. We don't have the security clearance, but it doesn't matter. We're at the point where we can just break things. We can really just look at the foundations of the dominant worldview and expose the fakery, and gleefully so, without the presumption that we're somehow violating any sort of taboos, that we're killing sacred cows. Like, who cares? These are a bunch of lies. So what I'm suggesting is that we foster a culture of non-belief, fill in the vacuum where objectivism should have existed, where atheism should have gone, rationally speaking, because what we're doing is we're deconstructing a God construct and a religion, and we are exiting their box. And it is a God construct, and it will take the arguments against the divine fallacy and various other religious premises that atheists use. But my point is, there are no real objectivists in the world because they filter their perceptions through media. There are no atheists because they have become worshippers of Gaia with faith in scientism. So what we're doing here is we're moving into a new space. The parallel media is what I'm using to describe it, but this is a space for a position of skepticism that doesn't exist on the world stage, because we are including our understanding that the world view that we share isn't objective. It's not a reflection of the world. It's not a window to the world, but it's in fact something that's been highly tampered with. And it's built on mind war. It's built on a schism that cannot be reconciled, that will be a source of perpetual turmoil. They designed it this way. I often describe the schism in everything and how everything is designed to create these mutually exclusive categories on a very specific chasm. So even taking a side, in my view, is to engage in a losing game and to have your worldview constrained. But we are absolutely taking into account what we know about media, and therefore liberating ourselves from the entrainment, the up and down. Like, when was the last time you were stressed out by a news story? World War III, Civil War, running out of food, blackouts. Like, I have not been in a very long time. I'm not a believer. I see Alex Jones having a conniption fit over 5G towers and military age men from other countries. And he's panicking, so his listeners panic. And I'm just not even slightly affected by it whatsoever. And generally, truthers will say, okay, well, then you're bad. False sense of security. You're apathetic. You're lazy. And it's like, no, I'm a conscientious objector from the Psy War. And if you're participating in it, you're following controlled opposition. It's provable. Dave Hicks says, I think you do an excellent job at describing the daily BS, bread and circuses. It's just that, in my opinion, it's beating a dead horse. It's not beating a dead horse because we're not trying to wake people up in Normiville because they're having a great time. They're dreaming. A woke town is married to big government, and they're not salvageable. Trutherville is controlled opposition. So the only thing that we're doing is we are aggregating at least 10,000 skeptics who figured this out, who aren't attached, who are irreverent when it comes to mass media baloney, lies, phoniness, fakery. And once we have our 10,000, we will have a fourth presence on the world stage that is not of the world stage, but we will be its most harsh critics. And this hasn't happened before. If you look at this situation we're in right now as a historic analog, perhaps, the movable type press, the internet, the counter reformation, we're kind of encountering something very similar, where there's a great potential for people breaking free from reality, or rather worldview monopolists. It's in the hands of religionists. It is. It's in the hands of a priesthood that have seized the means of mass perception for themselves. And what I'm suggesting is that in a way, this could be a minor neo enlightenment for those who are prepared to receive it as such. And I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, they can censor it so much, but my objective is we strategically take out the fundamental beliefs that hold up Trutherville, that keep these sheep in their pen. And once we break that sheep pen, these guardrails, then we'll see how many can be salvaged. Because I have this objective. If you want to know what my goal is, aside from launching a tabloid off of this perspective, is I think we could quite easily do a great deal of, I don't know what you want to call it. The damage control is going to be fun to observe. 144 says your sound seems very low. Okay, a few people have been saying that my sound is low. Interesting. Don't know what the deal is, but I'll try to fix it. Angst G says the news cycle is repulsive. If you take it seriously, the stress can send you to an early grave. Yes, psychosomatics, placebo effects, not to mention other stressors, xenophobia, phobias. Like, if you were scared of light poles and scared to touch doorknobs, and you were terrified of people from California, like if you had just these irrational fears, you would be seeing a psychiatrist, you'd be talking to a therapist. But when you look around, it's like, no, actually, a lot of people are just accepting fears unquestioningly. And we're a very superstitious society. Very superstitious. And it's not goblins and witches and werewolves and vampires. Ironically, those things probably exist. It's these hyperstitions, whether it's chemtrails, climate change, or any number of fake moral outrages they've contrived. And then, of course, every sort of political doomsday scenario. Trump is Hitler or Trump is Christ. And, of course, it just seems like these things are unchecked because there's no reality testing. And I like to think of it as the Hunger Games, where they have that model of the world on a table and they just throw something out there onto the stage and it becomes real, just like Westworld, the programmers. So the Westworld actually describes it perfectly. It has this recurring scene where you have the Westworld on a desk, like a miniature, it's a little model, and the programmers can add something into it, and then it exists for the people within it. And that's how this works. We have the programmers on the outside and the programmed on the inside. The only people who aren't programmed are those who have been deprogrammed. And those would be the ones who've been let in on the secrets. But they have to go through a deprogramming. By default, you're programmed. And that means that the veil has to be removed from their eyes. The wool, the hoodwink, has to be lifted. And today, the hoodwink is the ubiquitous screen. That is the hoodwink. And if it's not removed, you're not deprogrammed. Although now there has been a new development, and that development is us. The development is skepticism, repurposed, understanding what media is, and this auto-hoaxing, fakeology, media skeptics, whatever you want to call it, it's refined, and it has been refining because we are not allowing ourselves to be gaslit into not seeing what we're seeing, and we happen to be arriving at the correct conclusions. I think it's rather groundbreaking that we've come to an understanding about what predictive programming is and how it works and what its purpose is. David Hicks says 99% of your listeners pretty much agree with 90%. How many would you guess are in your army currently? Good question. My plan here, because my guess is that 100,000 is my guess. And I don't mean people who just say everything's fake, but that's a good starting point, but it's not good enough. But I think there's easily 100,000 who are close enough that if they accept a few other basic statements here, axioms, then yes, they will be there. But I think it'll metastasize. I think it has to start off like 10,000 and then it'll grow from there. There's a lot of people on the fence. And there's another element here that I don't talk about live, but there's another element, another wild card that could cause the numbers to go up out of control, but I don't want to say yet. Do Us in Paris says almost 144,000, then Scotty can beam us up. That's a Mandela effect, or Tim Pool effect, sorry. I guess we can call it a Tim Pool effect. Since we debunked the Mandela effects, we are now referring to these discrepancies as Tim Pool effects. Tim Pool doesn't have an E. G33 says Army, how provocative. Yeah, exactly, Army. It's like, look, I'm like, we're inactivists. We're conscientious objectors. We're not participating in the Psy-War. You can't call us an army. It's a raft, lazily drifting atop the sea of irrelevance. There's no army in that sense. And I don't think you can be anti-war if you're not anti-Psy-War. So if you're taking sides and you're voting, sorry, you're part of it. You're part of the problem. Elvin Tusk says, Tim, have we determined that the foreign documentary was indeed surveillance? It's funny you ask. I was thinking about that today. I don't think if it was merely surveillance, they would have sent the crew with that equipment and that budget, which I can only guess at. However, it is kind of interesting that I was working on a documentary, and then this documentary crew invites themselves over. Yeah, we'll come here from Scandinavia and spend a day there. But I was happy to entertain them, realizing it could be a setup. Almost assuming it's a setup. I'm like, okay, they're gonna Mark Sargentify me. It's like, make this guy look into a crazy basement dweller. Living with this, nothing against that. Living with your parents is great. But I thought they were going to try, in a way, I don't know, sabotage or something, discredit me. But it's like, no, you can't discredit me at this point because I don't want credit in your closed system. It's wrong. It has the wrong perspective. It doesn't know what it doesn't know, and it's too arrogant to look at the possibility it may have accepted some faulty explanations. So I don't care about that necessarily, but it did occur to me it could be sabotage. And in a way, how could it not be? If you think about it, one of the things that's been pretty consistent is that conspiracy theorists are dangerous. They set themselves on fire. They're radicals. They hate government and all this stuff. So, of course, the public perception is already against it. So that when they show me in this documentary, there's no way I'm going to come out looking like a rational actor. They're going to suggest that I'm either a dangerous ideologue who doesn't believe what he says, or worse, I'm a dangerous ideologue who believes what he says. But it's a win for us because I didn't do it for their entertainment. I did this documentary because I want to make sure that every person who is capable of this paradigm shift gets the message, and they will get it through. I saw this as a commercial. It's just promotion. It hasn't been released yet, but that was last September, and it wouldn't surprise me, given the scope of the project. They were talking to a lot of different conspiracy theorists, if it's going to be put through some film festivals first. So it's out there. Like, I can't undo it. I mean, even if I had a radical change in perspective and I decided that the earth is a ball and dinosaurs are real and we're going to experience climate change if we don't cut off the capitalism. Like, if I went just total full-blown brainwashy back into the Truman Show, the damage is done. For the rest of my life, I will be known as this person who thinks the earth is flat. And I don't even explicitly say the earth is flat. In fact, I make the point it's about worldview, but I know how the public perception is going to go. But I thought this is the perfect way to rise above any censorship, if you think about it. Elephant Tusk says, doesn't matter, I'm sure they have a big file on you. Well, it was very conveniently timed as well. It happened to be on Labor Day, so the office was empty. But I don't know if it's going to come out sooner or later. It's out of my hands, but I'm still working on my own projects anyway. It was educational, and it gave me a lot of insight as to how to record interviews. But it did seem kind of strange and out of the blue because I was quite literally preparing to record a documentary and hire my own crew. And then I get this email and they're like, hey, we're going to be in America on these days. Can you meet up with us? And I kind of sold them on the concept. So that was like right after the headquarters opened up as well. And I had a stack of Auto Hoaxology 101. And I thought, let me make this the focus, because if this book has any kind of traction at all, it'll accomplish our bigger goal here. What the purpose of Auto Hoaxology 101 is, it's to put all of our best concepts and ideas into a concise format, what you could consider to be a philosophical framework for applying skepticism in a hyper-mediated environment with a full understanding of how media is integrated with entertainment, politics, government, and everything else. Doesn't it make sense? I mean, shouldn't conspiracy theorists in general just start trusting themselves? That's all we're doing. We're figuring out, we figured out a few things. We know what we know, and we're no longer walking on eggshells, because that's what truthers do. A lot of them do. They walk on eggshells. They think, oh, you got to plant seeds. Red pill them on Thanksgiving. Plant seeds, maybe just talk about it endlessly online, but they don't really do anything with it. There's no organizing around what they know. It's really not. It's just the counter. It's the anti. It's the reaction to the mainstream. It's 100% controlled. But there's a point where it's like, well, to be honest with myself, I don't pretend to believe anymore, and that has deeper implications. Dan says you can give lectures about media stuff. Oh, that's the whole point of this book as well. I have a stack of them here, by the way. The purpose is I want to do book readings where I will read a chapter from the book and describe what relevance it has with regard to this or that fake event. And these are going to be recorded and live streamed. And I'm going to kick this off soon. It's just budgetary constraints, but I'm getting there. The purpose is I want to use 2024, the second half of the year, to distribute as many copies of this book as I can. And I think that the book will sell on its own merit, but it's not targeted towards media believers. It is specifically targeted at non-believers, and it's fine-tuning non-belief, because there's a qualitative difference between saying that I don't believe in koalas and duck-billed platypuses and then saying 9/11 was a movie. Like, these are radically different claims, and one of them involves low information non-belief, just a rejection of evidence. The other one is an informed disbelief, rooted in skepticism and often arriving at agnosticism. David Hicks says, I think the right to travel is a perfect way to take action. But action, in what sense? Like, what I promote is inactivism. And I think that's the only rational posture to take. Activism will be co-opted, and it won't solve anything, because we're not trying to wake up Normieville. Let them sleep. And Trutherville is compromised, but that's where we're kind of targeting. But no, there's no activism. It's inactivism by design. A refusal to get involved. Now, it doesn't mean ignoring. It means responding, not reacting. I saw a bunch of truthers crying because they believe that 1,500 children were incinerated by direct energy weapons in Maui. and they were looking for the remains. They were angry, just besides themselves. Just they went through all this gamut of emotions, bereavement, and all that. And I'm like, fake dead kids' lives don't matter. Prove they existed. None of them could prove they existed, and it turned out that those numbers were generated from how many students went home from school that day and didn't go back that day. It was just some erroneous interpretation of some facts. So, in other words, the people who were crying over this mass casualty event were over emoting over something that didn't even happen. So, what does it mean to be involved, to get active? It's like, no, the sane position here is to not get triggered. But no, if anybody wants to travel, by all means, travel. I am going to be traveling. I think it's great. Travel while we can, before they rate limit you on how many steps you can take a day. I didn't even realize until recently that my steps have been tracked with my iPhone. I went to my health app. It'll check your breaths eventually. They want to rate limit your tweets, your thoughts. That is the agenda, by the way. You realize that we have all witnessed the advent of the thought crime, where they have turned the concept of the meme and memetics into mind viruses, and then we were trained on how viruses work and how we have to quarantine against the super spreaders, and then they transplanted that onto mind viruses and the mental arena and cyberspace and mind junk contaminating cyberspace. So now we believe in mind virus super spreaders, mind viruses, and the need for what will likely be an online counterpart to the quarantine, which will happen soon. But no, I'm not opposed to what people would call, being engaged. I'm certainly engaged, but I'm not at all anti-media. In fact, I'm a skeptic of media. I'm a critic, but I go to their movies. I watch their shows. I think it's fun, entertaining, sure, but I'm not trying to stop anything. That's why I chose the term parallel media, because we're not anti, but we are maintaining a concurrent record of events as observed from the perspective of an objective and skeptical frame of reference that takes into account what we know about how fake mass media is. David Hicks says, when I say right to travel, I mean using an automobile without a license plate, not registered, no insurance. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. Like, I have no problem with it. I don't feel oppressed at all by having to have my vehicle registered or having to obey speed limits. Like, to me, it's a matter of life and death. And the people who say that you can just refuse all these laws and do all this stuff, well, then do it. Why preach it online? Do it. Go be an outlaw and see how far it gets you. I think it's kind of poisoning the well, because I'm not at all advocating any kind of activism, friction. I don't even like the idea of being a jackass at the city council meetings for attention. Like, if I go to a city council meeting, I'm going to stick to my 2 minutes and I'm going to read a script or something in a way that is not meant to be disruptive to the other speakers. I think there's no reason to be impolite. I don't think you should be screaming and protesting at the police or the media when you could easily schedule an interview and sit down and talk to people. Like, I'm not an activist, I guess I should say. And I don't care about my license plate or my driver's license. I'll admit, I went 2 years without a driver's license, but it wasn't out of some kind of principle. It's because I just didn't care. I didn't need it. I wasn't really commuting a lot, and I wasn't drinking at the time. And I got really good at side streets and avoiding where the cops are, actually. I became very avoidant of police officers just by training. Like, I'm pretty good about that now. But no, I'm not really at all interested in any kind of libertarian or anarchist type of posturing, like that guy Maxwell Asrello set himself on fire to protest Peter Thiel and billionaires and corporations. Like, no, to me, if it's like in the movie war games. Strange game, the only winning move is not to play. So I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to be engaged on that level. But I do think there are many efforts to. This is why I left Trutherville. Trutherville is full of all kinds of grifters, full of all kinds of agendas, and full of all kinds of bad ideas that are meant to destroy the integrity of the quote truther as witnesses, as functional human beings, to get them alienated. So they would like to have you thinking that fighting the system or being autonomous or something involves legal arcana at whenever you get pulled over. It's like I don't even get pulled over. Like these are fake issues. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry because what I'm suggesting is that these are boxes within the Trutherville containment realm, and I'm trying to break away from that. Dewis in Paris says, I feel like you'd give off more loose trying to jump outside of all the free men on the land loop than just ride the slippery slope towards needing a license to live. I don't see it as an imposition. I don't. Like, I like the fact that not everyone is off the grid and some people are tracked. You know how many offenders there are in your neighborhood? I mean, it's scary if you look it up. Like, no, I think we need a total surveillance society. My vehicle, my catalytic converter was stolen. You know how many Bluetooth speakers have been taken? I'm like, I could start leaving snacks in my truck because every night someone's going through it. Like, I'm not totally against regulation and laws and rules. Like, come on. Angst G says, did you ever discuss the Miles Mathis article on Israelo? Yeah, actually, he suggested that the op was targeting him. Now, I suggested it's targeting us, likely both. Actually, more likely him, Miles Mathis. He's probably closer to Israelo than we are from his perspectives. But yes, I did go through it. I wasn't able to access it. I'll probably pull it up again. But no, it's obviously the case that there are a myriad of distractions and rabbit trails that don't lead anywhere that will only alienate you and disempower you if your objective is to get off the grid mentally, to escape their closed system, worldview, hyperstitious construct. You have to leave Trutherville. You have to leave Normie Land. And Trutherville is a subset of Normie Land, as is Woketown. What does this mean? It means that in order to even escape the primary box, you're going to have to let go of a lot of trutherism and truther orthodoxies that you can't verify. And sadly, for a lot of people, that includes chemtrails. Sorry. Let's see here. Commenter says, I advise you make your vehicle legal or you will lose it. Yeah, my vehicle's legit, and I'm in the club. I got the club on my wheel. So if somebody steals my vehicle, they will replace it. I have a wheel lock, but like I know when someone's rifled through it because the seats are all forward because they check what's behind the seats. I have a thesaurus they haven't touched. And I've suggested somewhat jokingly that yeah, I could probably leave $500 cash in my thesaurus and it will be untouched. And I do have a thesaurus there because whenever I'm sitting around, I do make it a point to try to not be so redundant with the things that I say. Okay, let's see what else. Let's continue our breakdown. We have about 10 more minutes here. So I'm going to make a note. I'm going to get a new phone number. I'm going to have a new phone number added to the channel because we need a queue. We'll get more callers that way as well, I guarantee it. We'll have back-to-back callers. Dewis in Paris says, aren't those extinct? You know, one thing I can say though is that internet searches are shallow. Like we get a lot of great content and it's easy to get immersed on the internet. Even people disparage Wikipedia, but as a source for sources and as a lead, it's great. It leads into things, but the physical book, I think, allows for a lot more content to be absorbed a lot faster. You miss so much. You just skim the surface of the internet. So I make it a point because I have a thesaurus app, and I never have time to click the app. It's just never going to happen. But having the book there, I actually use it. And I got into the habit of Kindle and ebooks, and I found that I wasn't reading as much as I used to. Because if I can take a break from the screen, it's nice. So I make it a point now to go into the meat verse and get these books since I haven't. And I thought they were. I kind of thought that in 2020 they're going to make the make the point that everything is now a super spreader. We have to burn all printed media. Not quite there. Okay, so I'm going through your comments. Again, I apologize for the phones not being on. It's just one of those gremlin situations, and I haven't been able to figure it out. What's with the ringer? But I thought, yeah, after 2020, it's like watch them Fahrenheit 451, all printed content. No, the magazine, the tabloid that we are developing, and we have issues ready to go. It's just a matter of budget. But the objective with it is to release it in a truncated version, freemium, with the printed version available online through the order, but that it would be fully integrated with the PDF version through QR codes. So you have a tabloid, but you can also have the audio version of every article plus podcasts and interviews, etc., available with your phone. So it's fully integrated. It's reciprocal with the online. So it kind of bridges that gap. Well, we'll be live likely tomorrow morning. David Hicks says the right of a citizen to travel upon public highways and to transport his property by horse-drawn carriage, wagon, or automobile is not a mere privilege which may be permitted. It's a strange hill to die on. Out of all the different issues to make your issue, the one that I have the right to just get in a vehicle and go anywhere at whatever speed. I mean, what are you actually asserting here? Like, are you even being realistic here? Like, just think about how irrational. I mean, haven't you ever? I mean, we're talking about a very special situation that's new. That's a modern development. Traveling at high rates of speed, it's very complicated. There's really not any room for bullshit, whether it's intoxicated drivers or people who don't think the rules apply to them. I'd like to have more people obeying the rules. And of course, you want to call in, and I'm like, why? This is a platform with no agendas. We don't have any of those agendas. If you're an anti, or if you're going along with some kind of pre-existing conspiracy theory from Trutherville that's never led anywhere, it's not going to reach an audience here. Like, I talk about audiences as in their frame of reference. You might reach some people in Normieville. You'll certainly reach people in Trutherville, but you're not going to reach a single person off world stage. I mean, you can give us your best pitch if you want to, I guess. The other night we had a caller who was pitching xenophobia and white nationalism, and it's like, okay, can we just stay focused on breaking free from the mind war? All these political footballs, all these agendas are going to be left behind. These are all distractions. And they're meant to distract you from the big lies. And there's nobody organized on the principle that the worldview is a false model. This is beyond just saying the earth is flat. This is beyond saying NASA's lying. No, this is a step up. It's about the mental construct. This is an intellectual revolt against a system that requires that your default position is you're selectively stupefied. Gorilla says the main reason for determining the widths and placements of highways to be able to move military hardware and to plant them when and where it's needed. Well, the military hardware today is the television set. It's the TikTok app. It's your iPhone. Because the war that's being waged is 100% mental. It's all media. Dave Hicks really wants to speak. I told you the phone ringer is broken. A lot of people have been trying. I'm going to have to update it. But what I'm saying here is that I decided because the other day I had a caller who's pitching blood purity, racial grievances from a white nationalist perspective, and that's fine. I don't care what your perspectives are. But you're not going to have any traction where we are communicating from. It's like you're you're talking about a very specific worldview that accepts a certain set of assumptions about the world, and those assumptions are all stemming from a frame of reference that accepts at a very basic level the world stage according to Normiville, with a little bit of MSM plus, a little conspiracy theory. But what we're positing here is that that's not enough skepticism. It doesn't go deep enough. Like, I don't think we need any truth or orthodoxies hampering us, whether it's absurd doomsday scenarios or false flag theories. Like, if people still believe in false flags, we don't need them. And so, again, yeah, this might be the wrong choir. Like, you may truly believe that you don't need a license plate and you can drive your own speed limit and all this stuff. Fine. Like, I don't care. Take your horse and carriage and go on the freeway if you feel like it. The rules don't apply to you because of some legal arcana that you're going to tell the cop. Like, where were all you people when George Floyd was being oppressed? None of these people were saying, George Floyd should have just said that the laws don't apply to him because. They're suddenly quiet. David Hicks says, you're belittling a court ruled right versus ordinances that do not apply to free men. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is this free men concept might be valid. I don't know, and I quite literally don't care because it exists within a false paradigm. Nukes are fake. The whole left right dialectic is fake. This guy who burned himself because Clinton is friends with Trump and all this stuff, like, that's not going far enough. I'm saying it's still in the box. You would be reaching an unresponsive audience, to be quite honest. Lean Dion says David is on the road engaging in commerce. We know this stuff. No, I kind of what I'm suggesting here, David Hicks, is that like you get people, their issue is guns. Like, they're going to take our guns. It's like, no, they're not. They've already taken your mind. They're never going to force poke you. They're never going to do any of these worst case scenarios. And I think that what you're spreading here is a mind virus targeted to discredit and alienate alternative thinkers with some mumbo jumbo that will only further uh, entrench them, I think, within this anti position. And I'm anti. I don't know if you caught that, but one of the points I've been making as of late is that we are anti. I have a short ebook called Anti, a skeptical perspective on trutherism. And you can read that. I'll put a link in the chat right now. It's on X. And what I'm maintaining here is that the world stage is a internalized concept of the world the consensus accepts as the real thing. But what's more is simply that the left and right exist within a fictional universe. And this whole article breaks down the fallacy of taking sides. And if you're fighting in this, if you have a cause, yeah, you're losing. The only winning move is not to play. And what I'm leading us to is this: the off-world stage quarantine. You don't beat the Psy-War where they control the field with obvious tactics like protesting. You were talking about protesting. It's like, no, that will always lose. My intention is to quarantine deprogrammed minds. Everybody enters the Psy-War unaware. Every indication is that humanity is programmed into the frame of reference defined by this monolithic media religion. And this means that the masses have been converted into believers, and they lack a specific understanding to know that which they believe. They've been divorced from reality. They've been removed from it by one step. Everything is coming through a filter. So this process of quarantining is we amass a parallel media composed of non-believers with media skepticism as a foundational tenet. We separate from the phony alternative media with all of their phony issues. So what I'm just suggesting here is that your issue may not be relevant to our objective, which is a philosophical rejection of a false model, of a de facto state, church, and religion. It's a philosophical posture, skepticism. And when we're getting involved in confronting police with alternative beliefs, yeah, that to me is the definition of activism, and I'm an inactivist. And the reason why I'm an inactivist is that I don't want feds to get in our midst and then take a bullet for us. Like, oh, I'm an auto hoaxer, come at me. It's like, no, no, sorry. The auto hoaxer is going to be uh, laying by the pool, listening to the radio. Like they're not going to be out with Antifa or riding on the freeway, baiting the cops into a potentially disruptive conversation or escalation. David Hicks says, bro, so disappointing to hear you sound against protecting Supreme Court ruled upheld right to travel, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, bro, again, I'm happy that you have your opinions and your mission in life. But as Woodchipper 10K says, no one here really cares. Why would I care? I don't care. Nukes are fake. There are people who would say, hey, we need to, protest against nukes. Sorry, I don't think so. Nukes are fake. There are people who are crying for fake dead kids whose lives don't matter. What's crazy? What not crazy? What's just ironic, I guess. Kind of sick is that you could have a mass shooting that's fake. Theatrical blood, fake tears, on TV. And the next day, real people show up and real people give their money. Real people cry at the candlelight vigils, so real tears, and real people donate blood for all the victims. Wait, there weren't any victims. So where's that blood going? So all these tears, all this money, all this blood, they actually get a blood and tear sacrifice. They get libations. The priesthood gets its sacrifices with a simulated event. But where's the blood going? Let's see what else we have here. David Hicks says, I have not driven without a license plate yet. It's a pretty big decision. You're like, hey, everyone, get rid of your license plate. Well, you first. Like, that's disappointing. Like the people who say, oh, you don't believe in the space station, just go outside and look. Have you ever seen it? No. Like, so you're here giving us bad advice. You're like, hey, just go tell the cops the rules don't apply to you. See how that goes. Have you done it? No. Like, that is crazy that you would even come in here and suggest it. That's why it seems like a provocateur. You know how you have mobs of people and then they infiltrate, and then somebody who infiltrates throws a rock to get it started? David Hicks is coming into our group of inactivists who aren't the least bit perturbed about basic responsibilities like paying for your insurance and getting a driver's license. Like, we're not contesting this stuff. And he's like, hey guys, rules don't apply to you. Don't pay your bills. Screw society. F authority. Have you ever done that? No. No, I've never done that. Okay, so you're telling us to buck authority, and yet you've never done it? Is that what? Because A, you're lying, or B, you're a coward? You want someone else to do it first? Give me a break. That has got to be a provocateur. Whoever called David Hicks a Fed first, very discerning. That's hilarious. Upside Down Guy says, get an extra large memory card for your phone so you could video record your whole trip to jail. Right. Right. Well, see, then when they go to jail, it proves that they're beating the system. I mean, it's a really self-destructive cycle. Why even engage? And it never really worked on me. I had a lot of people try to tell me that, hey, you need to leave aside deconstructing fake news. Leave aside the philosophical divergence from mainstream thought. No, instead, here's how to get out of a traffic ticket. That should be your focus. It's like, I'm sorry, it never really appealed to me. Like, I'm talking about a paradigm shock because our worldview is false and NASA lied and maybe the Earth's flat. And they're like, you shouldn't have to pay a traffic ticket if you just knew your rights a little better. Like, it never appealed to me. And I don't mean to belittle and condescend it, but it just seems like trivial. It's like Karen behavior. Like, no, I don't want to be a Karen on the freeway. I'm not a vehicular Karen. Like, oh, when I drive around, I'm going to be a Karen and I'm going to act like I'm the boss on the road. And, oh, I'm going to talk to your manager. Give me your badge number. Give me your manager's badge. Give me your manager's badge number. Like this is how I do it. This is how I'm gonna Karen you out of. Like, give me a break. It's a Karen move to try to act like you're the boss. Like you work for me, and I know your job better than you know your job. Give me the yeah exactly. Portal Complex says the provocateur has the same boots as Johnny Law. Yeah, David Hicks, go for a drive. Why don't you? Why don't you call? I'll get my phones on, but I want you to be driving and drive at whatever speed you feel like, because you're a free man. 65, that's for slaves. Why would you go 65 miles per hour? So get in your car, I'll turn on my phones, and once you go to 88 miles per hour, call me. And then we'll talk about your rights, my rights, but my rights. 505-349-0420 phones are open. Let's see here. All right, this has been interesting. I did turn my phones back on, but we've had issues with the ringer, unfortunately. Okay, Nathan, okay, yeah, I'll call you right now. Sorry I doxed you. Infinite Plane Radio, outbound.
Thanks for taking my call.
Hey, yeah, no problem. Thank you for calling.
I'm trying to, I can't figure Skype out. I just downloaded it. But hey, listen, I j- let me just answer this David Hicks guy. It's funny that he's bringing that up. I'm one of the people that would recommend bypassing all that stuff just because it's not worth the hassle, in my opinion. Um, you know, it might be worth the hassle to a point, especially if you're principled in that type of ideal. But to the rest of the people, it's just simply not worth it because the cops aren't gonna the cops aren't gonna even know what you're talking about when you present that idea to them. They're
Right.
stupid.
And
Let's
and
let's face it.
all the people on YouTube promoting this aren't going to have your back if it doesn't go right, and then you disrupt your life, your job. It just seems like needlessly confrontational. And then you got this guy saying, do it," and he's never done it. I'm like, "Wait, this guy's never even done it, and yet he's advocating this aberrant behavior?"
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, honestly, it, listen, if that's the way the law is, sure, do it. But at the same time, the cops are not going to know what you're talking about. The judge is will know, but they're gonna play the card so heavy that you're gonna spend multiple times in court. You're gonna have to go and fight it constantly. You're gonna miss out on your day-to-day regular activities just trying to prove this thing to them. And it's like, dude, just do it. Look, it's what, $30 a year to get a license plate. Yeah, it fucking sucks, but I mean, it's $30 a year is worth more to me than the time wasted spent on useless endeavors.
Yeah,
And
yes, agreed. I mean, time is one of our greatest assets, and we have this attention economy where they're fighting for every scrap of attention. And I'm not going to be misdirected to some ridiculous rabbit trail when we're looking at cutting edge media deconstruction. Conspiracy theories are just scratching the surface. And then I see this issue coming up quite a bit. And it's like this takes it into another realm where now you're physically getting involved with challenging the system in a way you may not fully understand. And if people want to, fine. But I just find it unusual that of all places, they try to pitch it here to me or to this group because we're not really necessarily about activism. And this guy says, "You're not an activist," but then he hasn't engaged himself. Anyway, appreciate the call very much. Again, I'm going to get rid of Skype. Skype isn't working. Cope says it's not worth getting caught up in the system over a damn ticket. I mean, if somebody wants to test out something, that's on them, but you're not going to have any bailouts from YouTubers in the comments who are like, "Yeah, do it, do it, do it," when they haven't done it. And Dave Hicks, unbelievable. He's going to come in here and recommend that the rules don't apply to you, but then he's still abiding by those rules. It's just hypothetical to him. Like, what is your incentive for promulgating a, an approach to something that you don't even engage in? Like, you don't even practice it. What do you? It's like, hey guys, I don't believe in this, but have you looked into the hollow earth? Like, maybe you should look into the hollow earth. Here's some facts about it. Now, is it true? I don't know. Like, I'm just saying, it just seems a little weird. Like, is somebody paying you? Is somebody incentivizing it? Like, oh, we want to make it look like the Infinite Plane Society group of inactivist, peacenik media skeptics are also anti-cop. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, it's Dave Hicks.
Hey, are you driving?
No, man, no. Why? Can you not hear me?
No, no, I was just suggesting that maybe you should be driving while we talk and get pulled over and just to see or demonstrate how this process works.
Hey, man. No, hey, listen. I listen to you quite a bit, and I agree with like 90, maybe 95% of the things you say, and I think you have a great way of distilling the meta or whatever you want to call it of what is taking place in our world. I'm not against you by any means. By the way, I'm Zoom Truth. I don't know if you remember Zoom Truth from back in the day.
Oh,
But
okay,
I just
okay. Zoom Truth. Yes, yes. Everybody should know who Zoom Truth
yeah. Well,
is.
I'm not. I didn't want to like people call me Zoom Truth. Started really bothering me because I'm like I'm not fucking Zoom Truth. I'm just a normal person. But yeah. So I kind of stopped watching for a little bit after one of our phone calls we had, but I still kind of came back to you. I think you might even have taken a break for a while. But anyway, I'm not. It's like disappointing to hear you say, like what I hear from you is you're literally saying, hey man, you should follow the rules, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that one should follow rules with traffic in particular because if you don't, people die. There are life and death consequences. I mean, so there's legal theory, there's principle, but then there's if we're not all on the same sheet in any place, I can understand disagreement in many places in life, but if there's any place where we should all
You
agree,
heard.
it's traffic. We're going
Mhm.
fast. We're in metal, cars that weigh tons. I mean, maybe we shouldn't really
Well,
be
that's
flippant.
your opinion. Is that wait? That's your opinion, I think, because that is definitely your opinion. Because the fact is that there are laws and there are rules, and free men they really only have to follow the law. Isn't that correct?
Well, here's the thing. Here's where I'm coming from. When
I mean, do you want me to make up some rules all of a sudden that you're going to have to follow rules?
well, here's the reason why I'm making the distinction between traffic and rules and laws in general is that for a number of years I was working as an embalmer and then decedent transporter where I picked up many bodies from pulled bodies out of cars. So I've seen the
Mhm.
result of people not obeying the rules when it comes to traffic. So I'm just saying maybe
Okay.
if anything is an area we can agree to obey to additional rules, even rules that might be seen as constrictive, like you can't go 100 in a 20 mile per hour zone, then sure, I think we should agree that hey, let's not kill each other. Like I think that's one place where we should agree.
Well, the problem is though, is that we have these rules, supposedly these rules in effect, don't we, right now?
Well, what about guns?
And you as
Do you think should I
a
be able to
person who
fire
interred people,
should I be able to fire my AR-15 in my backyard?
um, should you be able to fire an AR-15 in your backyard?
Yeah, I got a target. I mean, is that I'm a free
I
man?
think that if when you potentially could pose a danger to people, like if you have, I guess if you have the proper setup where no one potentially could ever get hurt from your firing it, if the Constitution protects that, I haven't looked into that, but before you sidetrack me off of that, all I'm saying is that you were bringing up the rules. The fact is that these accidents are occurring with the rules in place anyway. The vast majority of people are going to travel at a speed that is they deem comfortable. I've driven on plenty of highways, and let me tell you, it might say 65, but most people are going 85. Is that true?
It hasn't been my experience. And when I'm looking at
No?
accidents are generally caused by somebody breaking the rules or inattention or something where they break a rule because they weren't paying attention. So there's generally an infraction more than a mechanical failure. So I'm suggesting that no, I'm thinking that rules when it comes to areas where we're putting each other in mortal danger should be abided by. But everywhere else, yeah, I'm willing to debate, whether you should have the right to, for example,
Well,
smoke.
the problem, though, but the problem is that we're talking. You do have a right, and when I say that, it's been ruled upon many, many times. You have a right to travel without restriction. Period. So whether you want rules in place or not, it's not for you. Now, if you all of a sudden you're uncomfortable, you're saying that. What happens when you say, "Well, I'm uncomfortable people having guns too. I want rules against that." They've already established we have the right to travel. It's
No, look, I am
established.
uncomfortable. I don't think that you should be able to practice your AR-15 firing. I don't think you should be able to practice any guns like in a park where there's a playground with children. Just like I don't think you should make up your own rules when driving because there are children on the road. So like I just don't know why this would be the battleground for this particular point of disagreement. Like,
Again, nothing. Well, the fact is, well, this is the way I see it. The reason why I feel strongly about it is that I feel like people need baby steps to awaken to the lies. You take somebody right and tell them that the earth is not, you don't think the earth is a spinning ball. They look at you like you're freaking nuts. Maybe you can take them and show them a school shooting or I shouldn't even say that on the show, but something where an event that happens that we know is fake, and you can break it down for them piece by piece, step by step. You might have a chance. I mean, I hear like, I think you're saying your goal is not to awaken people at this point.
My
Is
goal
that
is that
true?
there's no point in organizing normies or truthers who are full of all kinds of alt beliefs that don't go outside of the box entirely. Like I don't think it helps. Truthers and normies and woke town dwellers, people who are still heavily propagandized, they can't be organized in any principled way. I've given up on them.
Like,
I have. I've
like
given up.
like like the previous caller, I heard him say, he's like, and it's completely true, and it's the reason why I haven't tried it myself. Traveling, not driving, because driving is supposedly commerce. Are you aware of that whole argument or no?
Yeah, I've heard of this and I've heard the arguments, but I kind of feel like these are archaic ideas that don't have any
Yeah, no,
relevance in the
that's
modern
fine.
world.
No, that's fine. But what I was going to say is that, like, I guess whoever said it, maybe it was Franklin, said when you're willing to trade a little bit of your liberty for a little bit of safety, you're going to end up with neither, right? And then your caller said it's not worth the risk. I agree with them for $30, right? But basically, what we're saying is that I'm willing to give up my freaking fundamental right that I have a right to travel, right? Without being harassed by some guy who's wearing a costume on the side of the road when I haven't committed a crime, I haven't endangered anybody, right? But
Can I
they'll
ask you a
pull you
question?
over.
How many times have you
Yeah,
been pulled over in the last 10 years?
probably not more than once or twice.
I haven't been pulled over before, so I haven't had the experience. And I don't
Mhm.
feel like my rights have ever been infringed. And I do think that my rights are infringed when people don't obey the rules because they are violating my rights. They are making
Have you?
things.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever sped? Have you ever gone over the speed limit?
Um, Probably. I mean, I don't like say, "Oh, screw the speed limit."
Probably.
What I'm
Probably.
saying is like I'm certain at some point I have, I'm sure, but my point is I don't deliberately flagrantly disregard it, and I actually obey the traffic
Who's
laws.
saying that anybody
I
does?
I obey
If
them.
you
I obey them.
would you admit that you have actually gone over the speed limit?
I obey the traffic laws out of courtesy to other drivers. Because here's why. I think everybody who's driving at a high rate of speed with their lives on the line needs to be on the same sheet. We have to have some agreement. And if we're all agreeing that we're all driving this direction, we're safe. But if you decide, I'm a free man, I'm going east on the westbound, well, then you just endanger us. So I don't think there's any reason to introduce this kind of contention.
Wait, 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 wait.
You're a
Wait,
terrorist.
who said anything about driving the opposite direction
You did.
of traffic, man?
You said,
What?
well, because you're a free man. You can make up your own rules as you go on the road.
No, that you're putting those words in my
Okay, so
mouth,
what is
man.
what is a free
hell?
man? A free man just gets to violate speed limit. You don't get to make up your own other rules. Do you have to signal?
Well, how many people violate? You just said yourself you probably have violated the speed
Well,
limit,
what I mean
right?
is, I probably went 23 and a 25, or 27 and a 25,
Yeah.
and then I
You've
caught
never
myself.
gone 75 in a 65?
I don't speed, and
Ever?
I've never been pulled over. So what does that tell you? I'm a careful driver.
Bro,
I'll
I
tell you
haven't
what.
been. Like
Look,
I said, I've been pulled over 1 or 2 times in 10 years.
look, I did
And I can
multiple.
tell you, I speed everywhere. Everywhere I go 80, 85 miles an hour in a 65 mile an hour zone. And guess what? People are going at least that speed with me or passing me.
No way. Okay, I don't believe it.
Hey, do you get on the roads? Do you ever drive?
You're telling me that you regularly go 20 miles over the limit and you never get pulled over in 20 years?
100%.
So
100%.
then what's the problem? Your rights aren't being
Bro,
oppressed.
I just went to the Eclipse and drove I don't know, from Florida to freaking middle of Indiana. In the entire way, I
Do you buckle
was
up?
probably,
Are you buckled up? Do you wear a seatbelt?
yeah,
Why do you wear
buckle
why
up.
do you wear a seatbelt? Sacrificing some liberty for perceived safety?
No, I feel like I feel like what? Some liberty. I choose to do it. I would, if I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't do it.
But it restricts your movement, obviously, and then they're telling you have
But
to wear
that's
it.
my choice. But that's my
You're
choice. I made that
you're
choice.
choosing to submit to the cops.
What are you talking about, man? Are you I'm starting to question your motives, man.
I'm sorry.
I-
I'm just trying to see on principle here, like how far you're willing to flaunt the rules. And as far as the speeding
Who
thing,
says anything about
look, for one thing,
wait,
you're the
you
one.
just said
You're the one.
flaunt the
Wait,
rules?
you said that you regularly
Rules don't
speed.
apply to me.
You're like,
Rules don't apply to me.
You're like, I don't like these rules. They oppress me. I violate the rules all the time, and I've never been pulled over. So like, you've never been oppressed. You've never been pulled over for violating the rules. So what is the problem here? They're not enforcing your
Well,
taking your
no. Well, my problem. I'll tell you. My problem is that I am. They want me to register my vehicle for I think $300 some that you have to do once every year or two. $300 they hate you for of money that's already been diluted from their ever increasing monetization, right? Of where they're just printing money on a daily basis, right? So that $300 is probably actually quite a bit more than that in actual buying power. But then not only that, then they want your driver's license updated. Besides that, they ask for you. Let me ask you, when people go into public buildings, if you've seen, you've seen the people who do the auditing, right? And the rules in the public building, they have little signs that say no filming. So those are rules. Those are the rules. But yet the people go in the buildings and they actually do film. Why do you think they're able to do that? When the police come, the police say, yeah, you can go ahead and break the rules. Why do you think they can do that?
explain why is that?
Because they have a right to. They're in a public space, and they're exercising what is a fundamental right. The fact that you've been brainwashed that you need to use a license and have a license on hand and have a registration, that's not my problem or anybody else's problem. That's a you problem. But to constrain other people to that is the same as saying that person who goes into a public space can't film. It's the same thing. You're trying to deny people a fundamental right.
I think what you're doing is what you may be missing here is that a lot of these ideas you're bringing up aren't compatible with the modern world. Like, do you really think you could function in life without identification in today's world? Because a lot of things are abstract. We don't carry around.
100%
I'm not going to carry around bags of gold. I like the idea that I have digital currency. It makes things easier.
Well, how many times do you have to use your identification? When was the last time you needed your ID?
I use it several times a day. I go
For what?
For my medically prescribed THC gummies, for one thing. I have to flash my ID. That gives me a couple of things. It verifies who I am, so I get my military discount. and I get the tax-free. So I get a pretty good deal because I have
Yeah.
my ID. It's really incentivized, in fact. But if I didn't have that,
Well, that's a license. Well, you're dealing with a licensed
hey,
activity.
Tim Osman is in the chat. He says Zoom troll.
I don't know why you think I'm trolling, man. That's crazy to me. Like, I'm just talking about basic rights. That's all. It's like you're against rights. I don't understand that. Do you agree we have a right to film in public spaces, or no? Or you're against that because they have a? If they
Well,
make
look,
a
okay,
sign
look,
that says you're not allowed to, I got, I got a ticket on the boardwalk. You remember I got the ticket on the boardwalk for filming in public? You support that then, right?
It depends. It depends on the context. Like, just because you have a right to something doesn't mean you should do it. There's also judgment, and there's a
What,
judgment call.
man?
There's a
What are you
judgment call.
talking
There's
about?
a judgment call you made. Sometimes it's rude. Sometimes you're
So
not.
our rights are, so we don't really have rights. They're all up to who gets to make these judgments. I'm interested.
Well, it depends on how good you are at reading the room, how polite you are, and it's about practicality and a smoothly functioning society. I bring up traffic because it's a great example of how, if we all obey the rules,
So we
can get
don't really have rights then, is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying
Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that. So every
if it's
social,
up to somebody else, if somebody else can make a judgment,
every
if
social,
somebody else can make a judgment on your rights,
Zoom
then you
trope.
don't have any rights.
Hey, look, you're hanging out at a friend's barbecue, and they say, "Hey, there's children here. Please don't use profanity." Are you going to say, "Well, you just violated my rights. F this, F that"?
Am I on their property?
Yeah. Or maybe no, you had a park. You had
I
a
mean,
public
of course,
park. Are you
if I'm on somebody's private
gonna,
property? Wait, see,
are you
I
going
don't
to cuss
think
in front of children?
I don't think. Listen, I think you are vastly ignorant on public versus private. I think that's all it is. I really hope that's it.
I'm just asking, okay,
But
on principle,
think,
would you swear in front of children because to do otherwise would violate your rights? Or do you agree that there's some compromise involved in functioning in society? Because it sounds
I
like
would swear in front of children for sure.
I think you're antisocial.
100%.
I think you're antisocial.
I've done it.
You're antisocial.
I'm not saying I would encourage it. I'm just saying that if like I think plenty of people curse in front of children on a daily basis, probably including, unfortunately, the vast majority of parents.
I'm just saying. I think you're espousing.
Should we put them in jail for that? What should we do?
I'm just saying you're espousing a very antisocial perspective, and it seems to bleed through on a lot of the things that you're saying.
So someone who wants people's rights to be upheld, their Supreme Court ruled rights, you're telling me is antisocial?
It sounds like you're taking things to the extreme of being entitled. Like, I have the right to this, therefore, it's like a Karen. You're exhibiting Karen-esque attitudes here on everything. And the whole idea of a Karen is, yes, you can do this, you can be a B, you can call for the manager, or you can be cool. And being cool is part of being civilized, being social.
So I could be cool and let people trample over my rights. That's what you're saying I should do.
No, recognize that they're doing what they have to do for the smooth functioning of
Why
society.
do I give a shit if I have the right to do it, bro?
You can be entitled. You have that right. And that's why America...
It's not an entitlement, bro. It's a right.
Okay, well, this has been great, Zoom Truth. I'm happy we were able to catch up, but
You're going to run, huh? You're going to run away.
No, I have a Zoom... I'm sorry, I have an Uber gig at 11. It's 11:03. But I'm glad that you were able to call in and get your views, because look...
I'm disappointed, man. I like listening to you, but I hope you study up on private versus public, man, and your rights.
Well,
because
let me explain
honestly,
one thing.
what you just said is
about.
pathetic.
No, let me explain something.
You don't know what you're talking about.
I do.
It's embarrassing.
Okay,
You're embarrassing. You're embarrassing. You should not even talk.
Okay, well, I don't think you should swear in front of children at birthday parties. Have a good night.
Put me in jail if I do then, right?
Yeah.
And put people in jail if they do.
Have a good night. All right, that would be Zoom Truth. And you may not know Zoom Truth. He was one of the street agitators for Flat Earth. 9/11 was an inside job type stuff. Did a lot of great work in activism. And, what can you say? It's not an easy field, and he maintained a very successful YouTube channel before they really started censoring the topic. So we're very familiar with Zoom Truth. Copaesthetic says Zoom would be tar and feathered for acting like an a-hole in public in the name of my freedoms. Well, he could be an agitator. I mean, he is a provocateur. We can agree what he was doing on the streets was provocateuring. And sometimes that's a very good tactic. And that's fine. That's how you get your points across. Sometimes. KKIN says, Tim, you're far from embarrassment. He's embarrassing. Look, I do take property rights very seriously. I'm involved in an intellectual property right case right now. Look, I sued a parking lot company for booting my car. And well, first I actually cut it off the car. They charged me with criminal damage to property. And I argued that my property rights were violated by an illegal impound and that I had every right to remove myself from the situation based on how um, I argued it as a right to, was it, I think, right from self-defense from coercion. And it's the same argument, like let's say you get locked in a store, like you're locked in Target and you have to get out and you end up breaking the lock. Well, is that damage to property with criminal intent? No. So my argument was that there was no criminal intent to steal the parking space when I took the boot off, but rather it was an illegal impound. And then I furthermore argued that the signs were too small to see, so I didn't even know I was in a paid lot. And I got off because I had a principled position on my property rights and what they could and could not do. And I spent a lot of time researching my position before I decided to fight a charge, which I beat. So like I don't take this flippantly, but I think it's silly to argue that the rules don't apply to you or the laws are there to somehow oppress you when these are the things that make life possible. I look at traffic as like a miraculous. It's one of the greatest things we've achieved. Our cooperation. Like you may not like everybody on the road around you, possibly you'd hate them all. But the fact is you're able to more or less coexist at high rates of speed where everybody's putting their lives at stake, and we do so in a functional way. And I don't see the point to being disruptive in all areas there in particular. Zoom Boof says 322. Dave Hicks says, thanks IPS. I enjoy that. Just get passionate about my rights. As you should. As you should. I mean, but I'm just questioning, of course, motivations for specific positions that almost look like they're trying to blackwash conspiracy theorists. Like, oh, these people who don't believe in the moon landing, oh, they'll fight you if you're a cop. And then the cops now go up to the car, oh, this guy's got an InfoWars sticker. Let's come out with our guns loaded. Like right now, I want to point this out too. Conspiracy theorists are thought of as the guys who set themselves on fire. That's who they are. They're the ones who shoot up schools. They write manifestos. And I'm not with that. That's not our clique. It's really not. And I'm trying to disassociate from fight the system to more like uh, take a distance off the grid kind of almost ivory tower approach. And so I could understand why Zoom Truth would consider me to be um, kind of an embarrassment to truthers because I'm not an activist. I'm like, I'm not fighting the system. I'm not resisting. I'm not defending rights. But I disagree because I don't think it matters. You know, you're in a Truman show and you're talking about rights in a very subjective universe. It's like, I don't know. Like, they already have your mind. Everything else is immaterial at this point. All right, let's see here. The unmediated mind says the smooth functioning of society is the foundation of fascism. Hey, sometimes teamwork is important. Working together isn't always slavery and bondage and oppression. I think it's important to make the distinction. You know, fascism sounds bad. Uh, I can understand the word, how you're using it, and all the connotations, but what about voluntary cooperation? We're talking about voluntary cooperation, voluntary collaboration. That's what we're talking about. G33 says, really spinning our wheels here tonight. Plain Dakota says, Dave Hicks is 2015 with his truthing. Yeah, maybe he got Tim Pool affected. Timeline jumper. That is an issue that was like 2015, where truthers would be getting pulled over and then school the cops on their rights. I never saw the sense in it, and I never will. I think it's a needless provocation, actually. I think it may even be that. It may be part of a broader objective to demonize truthers as anti-cop, as threats, as terrorists. Why would you want to add to that? That's what I'm saying. I hope that Zoom Truth has a fire extinguisher on his person. All right, let's see here. Going through your comments. Inks G says, don't smack a hornet's nest. I say, strange game. The only winning move is not to play. But I do 100% appreciate the caller. It's always better to get people to put things in their own words. I don't want to mischaracterize or strawman anybody's position. And look, if you're active and triggered and fighting the system, good for you. Good for you for being woke, for being on the political horseshoe, for being activated, agitated, and triggered. Because we want this. I mentioned this before. We want the friction. We want the debate. We want people to stand up on the issues they feel like fighting for so that we can create this divergence. We need to quarantine from believers and controlled opposition altogether. We want to get out of the gate-kept sheep pen, the paddock of Trutherville. And that's not going to happen if we don't directly confront these things. Like, look, you might even be triggered now if you're still listening. Chemtrails don't exist. They never did. Not only do they not exist, but they're easily debunkable by referencing one single document. The Appleman chart from 1958 shows you that condensation trails are a predictable byproduct of climatic conditions, and that you cannot make any predictive guesses about when chemtrails will or will not be sprayed. And the predictability alone rules out the alternative theory. So it doesn't exist. They don't exist. And there's a psyop being used against truthers to get them to believe they exist. And again, a lot of people won't want to hear that. KK says, I hope your phones are open next time I want to call. Yeah, I'll definitely do it. I'll definitely try to get my phones fixed. And look, in my opinion, wokeism is where you go if you're leaning to the left and you figure out the mass media is bullshit. If you lean right and you figure it out, you end up in Trutherville. And if you buy every presupposition, you're going to get triggered. You're going to want to fight the system. You're going to be resentful of people who aren't triggered, who aren't up in arms, who aren't preppers, who aren't getting ready for the end. That's by design, it's part of the dialectic. So it might be agitating as this proceeds when they find out how little we care, how ivory tower we are about this. Happily so. What was it, George Bernard Shaw? Is that who you agreed on? Who said it? About the don't wrestle with the pig because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. And that's kind of how I feel about this. And there hasn't been any kind of evidence or anything to contradict that assessment. You know, we've been looking at this closely. In fact, we've been looking closer and closer as time goes by. We take a very granular approach to psyop deconstruction. And since we've been doing this, we have yet to come across an instance where we've been flat wrong on anything. Why is that? It's because we're right. G33 says it was Mark Twain. Maybe it was Plato. This is Chief Crow Auto Hoax. I'll put the link below. I'll send out archives as soon as I can.